Pour écouter cette session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français.
Hello.
Bonjour.
Habari za leo.
On behalf of ICLEI Africa, the Africa Center for Cities, Our Future Cities,
Surge Africa and the Red Cross Crescent Climate Center,
We are delighted to welcome you to the Rise Africa 2023 Action Festival.
Rise Africa is a platform that brings together thinkers, doers, and enablers
to inspire action for sustainable cities.
This is the third edition of our virtual festival.
it brings together insights, practices, and visions from across the continent.
This year's theme is The Cities We Want.
the cities we want.
the cities we want.
The cities we want.
This mirrors the African Union 2063 Agenda vision, the Africa we want.
It is a wonderful Pan-African call for transformative change.
However, the agenda does not adequately embrace urbanization as a potential positive force for improving prosperity, inclusivity, and environmental well-being on the continent.
We need more emphasis on the role of cities and local action. And this festival aims to provide inputs into this agenda.
The cities we have are
Expanding,
incomplete,
inventive,
contested,
facing impending crisis, yet brimming with potential.
The cities we want are
people-centered,
Safe and healthy.
beacons of culture,
unflinchingly modern.
And adapting to change and leading global innovation.
We'll make these cities through
Experimenting,
learning
collaborating,
and amplifying the everyday actions of people who are shaping their cities.
The festival invites you to embrace different ways of knowing,
It invites you to forge new partnerships,
Experiment with new concepts and ideas.
to seek ways to bridge science, business, policy, and the arts.
Together, let's enter this space in the spirit of poetic possibilities.
À l'encre de mon sang, au papier de ma langue, à mes yeux qui tanguent lentement dans le vide, rêvant un jour de laisser des traces de regard sur les villes que nous voulons et imaginons au-delà des vers. Entre deux effluves, mon être crie utopie, mon cœur murmure héritage. Mon âme, elle, chante avenir. De villes riches de leur multiplicité, multiples dans leur diversité, unique pluralité niée hier s'est avancée vers un demain déjà avorté. Enracinement certes, mais ouverture dans ce village planétaire, laisser les sens alertes et réagir. Entendre la cacophonie banalisée des inégalités sociétales criardes laissées en fond sonore, voir et questionner le décor, bâtir et consentir à l'action qui sépare le rêve de la réalité. Sentir la fragrance vitale, belle et verte, inévitable baume au cœur, accepter notre responsabilité de léguer à nos enfants un monde en bonne santé. Démocratiser le goût, que plus aucun palais, d'aucune bouche, d'aucun enfant, d'aucun pays ne soit plus jamais sec. Démocratiser le goût des rêves, des voyages qui s'exécutent quel que soit l'âge, le long des pages, au fil des chapitres, sur le pupitre de la connaissance, seul germe du choix. Toucher l'idée d'infrastructure qui marche allègrement sur le chemin de l'innovation. Enracinement certes, mais ouverture dans ce village planétaire. Laisser les sens alertes, mais surtout réagir.
Good evening and welcome to the final daily debrief for Rise Africa Festival 2023. It's great to have you here with us and to have Paul and the rest of the team in the room with us. Really excited for the conversations for today. Today was the final day for Rise Africa 2023, And if you had been with us from the beginning of this journey, although we had the broader theme of the cities we want to expound on, we went through 3 different iterations. First, the cities we have on day 1, and then the cities we want yesterday. And today we centered on the cities we deserve. And that concept around deserving and who are we to deserve, why do we think we deserve it, and whether or not we actually do deserve the cities we want was center stage today, from the core session and down through most of the parallel sessions that ran. It's been a very exciting session. It's also been a very exciting day, but more importantly, a very exciting festival. We had a debrief with the team just about an hour ago, and everybody just putting out there, what is it that is your take home from this festival, and what is the one thing you hope to carry forward with you? And there are so many things, but one central theme that seems to be a recurring theme is the idea around inclusivity in our cities. The idea that if we were to deserve these cities, then we have to change our mainframe from an I deserve the city to we deserve the city. And I think that's probably where we should start our conversation with Paul today. What is this concept of we, and who is we? Who is included in we? Who is excluded in we? And I ask who is excluded, thinking back to some of the conversations from yesterday, and specifically thinking about Blaise and his entry yesterday around the tough climates within which he does the work that he does, but also the fact that certain people are made to feel less deserving of being within the spaces of our cities. And also thinking around what Ayel was said today about children in one of the lunchtime lectures, and thinking about us always centering children as the future, but children perceiving more than the future, they are in their own present. And do we also think that children deserve the city, or do we only see children within the context of the cities that they are to deserve in 10 years or in 20 years from today? And I think probably that's a great space to start today's conversation. Who is the we, and why is the we deserving?
You can see that this is a festival of ideas because we're brimming with them. And I think I'm struggling to find an entry point there, but perhaps the idea of co maybe comes out. I think Samira Fall, in her beautiful poem that started this session, talks about multiplicities and pluralism. And I think the obvious answer, in a way that just jumps for me, of course, is we want everyone to feel welcome in the city and everyone to contribute to what the city is. And some of the tensions that were discussed throughout the festival, but also with our team, is this sense of who has the power to drive the change. You mentioned children. There was a remark about elders always knowing best. And so the tension that we've spoken about in this festival and previous festivals as well jumped out at me again. We really want youth voice. We want to amplify the majority voice in this continent, 19 and a half being the median age of people in Africa. But we have a leadership deficit, and I don't think we expect the youth to lead at this moment. And then we've got a whole set of old and stuck leaders who know best. And so how do we find space to say that the paradigm we want is youth voice what you think is important, challenge the norms, that's where the creative energy can come, but also capitalize on and amplify the experience of people who have gone through things. So if I were to respond firsthand to that prompt, the idea that we push with ICLEI Africa and through RISE is the idea of intergenerational co-leadership that Aya Chebi, AU Youth Envoy in 2020, brought into the space. And so that if we're talking about Matthew Blaise, his remark was we need to engage with people in positions of power as allies and excite them about supporting our arguments as well. So intergenerational co-leadership, leadership across sectors, and a remark from someone just in a closing opening reflection is that crossing borders can be really scary. Crossing sectors, having conversations out of your own area of expertise can be really scary, but also, she reflects, really enriching and can help us to position ourselves better or enrich our own work.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Again, I'd like us to circle back a little bit to the idea around leadership and the leadership dilemma that we have in Africa currently. Besides the disconnect in terms of who are the led and who is in leadership, in terms of the age, the generational gap, there's also something Bright said, Dr. Brighton Nkrumah, that, and how he said the current crop of leaders we have are self-centered. They are not human focused, and hence they are unable to deliver on promises made to the people. But also the fact that leadership these days in Africa seems to be more aligned based on loyalty, as against loyalty to self-interest, rather than loyalty to the people. And how do we begin to address that? And yes, there is the consistent theme that ran throughout the 3 days of this session around building allies. But the question, I guess, that many people had in their mind, and I've had the opportunity to converse on the side with a few, is how do you build allies with a leadership that is so disconnected from you, or a leadership that doesn't have the same vision? Say, for example, the median age of leadership across the continent is probably about 65. The median age of most of the citizens is about 19.5. Now, the frame of a 65-year-old and a 19.5-year-old are two totally different things. And when you think of another 20 years, how do you come to that midpoint where leaders can truly become allies in this process? And many suggestions were put on the board, on the table, from the softer actions such as active participation of people within decision-making forums. And I thought that was very core, because it was something that was reiterated over and over again. The fact that Dr. Sarah Kadisi, in describing how we need to build cities, made a very poignant point of building cities for children, because when you build cities for children, then you build cities for everyone. If the cities can be utilized by children, if the cities are designed for children, then everyone has access within those cities. But when you build cities and think of children only as an afterthought, then that's a problem. But another option is also this use of courtrooms. And I know that for many, that's almost like the last option in this long continuum of options that we have to get us to the point where the leaders on the one hand and the citizenry on the other hand are able to come to a midpoint. Lastly is networking among civil society organizations, but beyond civil society organizations, just amongst people. I guess that's the platform that RISE creates. Being able to say you're a doer, you're a thinker, you're a policy practitioner, you are a researcher, and we've created this broad network. And come, bring your ideas. Every idea is welcome. We think that you have a lot to say to us, so let's hear it. And on that note, we're going to open up the floor, because today, Paul and I are going to be doing less of the talking and more of the listening.
I think it's hard for us to do that. I just want to emphasize that point again, that dialogue has shown up again in this festival, collaboration, partnership, and participation as central themes. But different to the last festivals, it wasn't this idea of dialogue and then what? It was a reiteration of the importance of continuous dialogue and reinvesting in that. So I suppose now I should segue into what you segued into just now. Yes. I think it'd be great to hear from you. I think we're blessed to have Abul Ajak and Lesego Bancheng, who had our lunchtime lectures in, and maybe we can start and hear some reflections from you. I know, Abul, you started your lunchtime lecture with a refrain that we've heard throughout the whole festival, which is, our future is not an individual dream, but a collective pursuit. And if there were one topic or one statement to summarize the festival for me, I really resonated with that. I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that point, and share your reflections.
No, thank you so much for having me here. Very excited to be a part of the festival, and I was also very excited to listen to a lot of the talks and how a lot of the speakers were able to enunciate a lot of really relevant themes and a lot of issues that we're trying to troubleshoot, within our urban areas, within cities all around the continent, both rural and urban. And I think when I sort of made that point, I was just thinking towards how, we always look at leadership as an individual thing, and we never look at entire communities being a part of leadership initiatives. And I think there's a lot of potential to involve people at very many points and very many processes, very many parts of the development process. We sort of see it as, this top-down hierarchical thing. And I think this needs to change because as a lot of citizens within the continent, people being excluded in certain forms of ways they have so much knowledge about this exclusion, and we sort of, just leave them out of a lot of the decisions that affect their lives. And that's something that can be transformed through more inclusive, systems of governance, more inclusive systems of, creation and more inclusive creation processes.
I feel like you might feel a bit deep-ended. What I really liked about some of the imagery that you had and your commentary about design shaping people's experience of space and people's experience of safety. And I was really struck by the imagery of people unlocking their doors or unlocking gates and moving through. And what struck me again is how many barriers we've put up in our spaces, and what I wrote down as a response to that is sort of these minute details of design. And here we are in the festival talking about these large ideas, but just those teeny things can really shape your outlook for a day and can shape your sensibilities. Responses.
No, for certain. I think because when I was working on the project Thinking Safety, I was very much interested in the very minute details of people's experiences. And especially with getting people to show and tell me what they were going through, because many times when I send them the participatory questions, there was a lot of them were dialogue based, and I think through the dialogue they were able to express their own experiences. But the seeing and telling is it's very effective in the sense that you're actually able to understand how certain things work. And even when I was watching it with designers or watching it with my class as well, critiquing this work, a lot of people were able to say, that could have been designed better. And people who are not even designers themselves were able to think through ways that they thought certain design aspects, would be altered to make their lives easier. And I think including people just allows us to sort of open up the possibilities of what those design aspects are, and making sure that people because things that seem so minute and seem so insignificant are actually quite significant to our lives. From the roads we use, the cars and how they're designed, where people park, where people drive. And you can see that, based on, for me at least, had the privilege of living in a few different cities, and how experienced these cities has been based on those very small details as opposed to the larger structure of the cities. It's usually, is there enough space? Is there a pavement, right? Because in Uganda, there's not a lot of roads with pavements. For example, is there traffic lights that work? Is there traffic lights that can enable people to cross the street properly, and those kinds of things? So these very minute things can completely alter our experiences of space. And I think that's important. And with Thinking Safety, it was a very gendered perspective, and I was looking at how women experience, space, especially in terms of safety. And not to say that men don't experience safety as well. Watching the film with men also, you'd have them say, yeah, I do that and I do that and I do that. And I'm like, yeah, this is something that a lot of people are experiencing because there's different elements of unsafety that exist in space, and spatial safety is definitely not, unsafety is not limited to women's experiences, but that also encompasses men, children, disabled people who also just, do not get to access spaces, who in certain cities as well, it's very rare to see someone disabled walking around, not because they aren't there, but simply because they just can't access these spaces. So I do think there's a lot of potential in sort of creating participatory engagements with different groups and just trying to troubleshoot different issues. And for me, using film is a way to spread these ideas and make them visible and make them just a part of like normative discussion. So that's why it was important for me that thinking safety is very accessible. It's not just a film that exists in festival spaces or streaming. Anyone can watch it on YouTube and anyone can have a discussion about those things.
That's a great point that's shown up throughout the festival, is the accessibility of language and the choice with which we use or deploy language. And I think right from the very beginning of the session, talking in these large concepts, renewable energy, and giving motivation around that, as opposed to storytelling. And a lot of our lunchtime lectures have had this theme. Telling a story is much more convincing. It touches on the emotions. It's more accessible. If people can see themselves in those stories, or it's spoken in a voice that's familiar, or there's been a lot of resonance about language and tone and emotionality that's brought out from that.
Yeah, but also speaking about resonance, I liked the fact that you were able to make the link between the right to safety and so many other rights, and people being able to show up in cities, in their communities, as their true authentic self when they felt safe, or otherwise when they didn't feel safe. And it just made me think or ponder a little bit around what the roles of different people and within their different stations in society is around either perpetrating violence or perpetrating safe spaces within our cities, whether knowingly, whether unknowingly, and whether there is a room, and of course, this is open to discussion, for beginning to push, and especially, as you said, in the context of women's safety in the city, where the room exists to begin to push the envelope or push the boundaries around us making a conscious effort and a choice to perpetrate safe spaces for everyone, but now not only for women, but particularly centered on vulnerable people. I mean, when we think about disabled people, today we had a disability rights activist who was on the core session panel, and the one thing she kept speaking to today also was disabled people being able to feel safe, and how we organize our collective power to push for that, being able to feel safe, being able to feel included also. And I'm wondering if you have some reflections on that.
Yeah, certainly. I think, yeah, there's like a very, very many valid points that you brought up. But yeah, I think my reflections are that, it's for us to, begin thinking of safety as a human right. That's not exclusive to certain people. This is for everybody within society, and everyone deserves to feel safe. And as long as we're not creating those safe spaces, I think we're lying to ourselves about the possibilities of even accessing that safety ourselves. Because even every time when I speak to different people, a lot of their fears are also stem from the fact that other people are safe, and because of that, there's a potentiality that this safety can cross the boundaries of other people's unsafety onto ourselves. That being like, living in a community that's, unequal, with different people, and not to even vilify people who have no access to things, but it's just a reality that there's a potentiality that people have to access their needs in ways that are both violent and unviolent. But I think, when it comes to human rights, there has to be a lot of education about how we perceive the rights of everyone. And a lot of constructs are not, like, they are definitely physical, but they're also psychological, and there are certain things that are so embedded in our minds that will affect, other safety. So, living in patriarchal societies, for example, and how these societies treat women, there's a need to actually undo the internalized patriarchy that many people have and hold, or living in homophobic societies, living in racist societies as well. Like, all this sort of structural isms need to be psychologically undone within, people's minds and people's psychology, so that they can start to actually act in ways that uphold the rights of others. So a lot of these things have to be dismantled within, like, physical structure, within space, but also within our own, our own mindsets and the way we actually engage with and interact with, people and places.
You need to give people opportunity to be able to step out of those norms, and reflect in, because, those are so locked in that people can't necessarily recognize them. And so, trying to name those more clearly and assist people to name those, I think, is really important. I want to do a rather clumsy segue, which is, you mentioned the idea of boundaries between each other and trying to break those down, and see if we can invite Lesego into the conversation as well, around the idea of the urban-rural continuum. And again, how are we relating across these different typologies? Lesego, are you available to join us? Yeah.
Yes. Hi. I'm around. I'm here. I've been listening very attentively to Bull's and the rest of you's conversation. I think that there are a lot of ties between incorporating safety into a city, and then also the rural-urban continuum. And for me, the tie that I perceive is our, to some degree, inability to, think outside of the heteronormative norm that we've been dished about what a city is, or what safety is, or who the city is for. Or what a city, or what role a city is really made to function in our society, and that it is the only kind of space or place that can truly, like, alleviate some of the issues that we face climatically, but also empower people economically and socially. And I think that in a lot of ways that we don't often perceive, there is a way that some of the rural typologies pour into the rural landscape. And it's not only, spatial typologies, but it's also ways of occupying space or thinking about space. And so sometimes there's an obvious tension that we see in these spaces that we can call, like, informal and all those things, but it's actually a different kind of perceiving or activity in the city. It's a new node that we're not familiar with, which is maybe flexibility within the city. We made cities to, kind of graft permanent things for ourselves, and it can be so mind-boggling when we see, flexibility or negotiable spaces in the city. And this is basically almost the continuum of what happens in rural spaces. Rural-urban migration is something that happens in South Africa that has been, painted as a problem, which it can be, but it's also a sourcing of different ways to occupy a city. It's also, even within housing, not only like the economic, informal trader, but the opportunities that people, make for themselves in a city to create a backyard system. The fact that, a home in the city is an anchor to bring in people from other places, but also it's not permanent, and that people can move through those spaces and go somewhere else and come back, and that, cities aren't things that prevent people from moving, but instead enable people to continuously move through rural, urban, or through other, continental shifts and other urban cities. So I think it's quite important to think about what are the cities that we want. What do we want cities to enable, especially considering climate change being key thing, being change, and cities being exactly that, not able to change. So I think those are things that we need to observe and learn from, besides people, what are things that move from rural and urban? And it's all these other ontological things.
Don't you think there's such fabulous imagery in what Lesego has added there? To me, this idea of false dichotomies, informal, formal, who needs to separate? In the spirit of yesterday, this we started adding city to words. So, this flexity, flow, hybridity. Yeah. What do you make of this for me?
Yeah, those are quite important like terms and lexicons, to really not confine ourselves to the idea of a city from 100 years ago. And when I say the idea, not only physical, but just the idea of what a city needs to serve,
And in your own perception, I'm thinking back to the opening of your lunchtime conversation, and particularly something which you said that struck me, saying not only do we design technologies, but technologies also design us. And I'm wondering, is there space in today's cities? Because many people perceive cities this day, very unlike how you've painted it. Many people perceive cities as fixed and not flowing and moving. Is there space, and are we seeing the emergence of redesigning of cities, particularly when you think about the rural-urban migration and just generally migration? That map which you showed at the beginning of your talk was very instructive, and it speaks to these false borders that we've all created, and how in the past the flow of people and the movement of people across the continent was so fluid, was so beautiful, the interchange of cultures. But it's a bit different now with our fake borders and with our passport controls and everything. And how do we begin to reimagine in this whole journey of thinking about the cities that we actually deserve and the cities that we truly want today? How do we begin to think about the cities designing us and us redesigning the cities?
So I think that, and I'll answer this question from quite a personal perspective. As a young person in South Africa, at my age, you're kind of forced to consider, okay, now you need like a more permanent place to stay. Like, are you a renter or are you like buying property? So there are also systems in place within cities that also, force you to make these negotiations that design how we are, right? Because, apartments exist in the way that they are bought, land is for grabs, is for payment. This also makes you think, okay, am I going to be somebody that's not located in South Africa or in Johannesburg, or can I move to Cape Town? It just confines you to a space. And so it's also making us into people that are also confined into space. But if we had systems in place of like property and safety and anchoring, but also, freedom, we would be able to also be, versatile people that would move through space. But because of the systems that are in place, not only the architecture, but also, just the system of living, it turns us into these, rock people that need an anchor of space, which is great for safety, definitely. But it's not also good in, kind of allowing us to also have these flexible perspectives, right? It's the reason why in our cities we have a lot of tensions about ways of being, where people from different places don't really they're not given the space to integrate well, because again the cities offers a permanence, but it becomes like a permanence of mind as well. And so that's then the provocation to say, if we design cities that allowed for more mobility and movement and that embrace, migration, if we had cities that were, if we had countries, continents that were borderless, like what kind of people would we be? Would we be people that integrated more? Would we be people that, weren't scared, weren't so committed in one space, but we were committed into offering the next space that we, encounter, instead of like, thinking about feeling stuck and hoping that the space that you're confined to gives you something, you would be more concerned about what you're able to offer other spaces. So I think that, it's the most difficult part becomes, redesigning a system that is designing us to be these kind of people that require this permanence and safety. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to follow that. I mean, I actually agree. I think the privilege to be able to move around has definitely shaped who I am, and the amount of experience engaging with different types of people. So absolutely, if that could be something that everyone enjoys, what a different set of we's we would be. I think that's amazing. I'd like to invite another provocateur from this morning, and Takwana, if you want to join us and add some reflections on what we're chatting about now, and add to it maybe around what we discussed this morning on the cities we deserve. And then it'll be great to hear from everyone else who's joined us tonight, if there were things that have stood out for you from this discussion or today as well. Taxi, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. It's just I don't know what the word is. I normally say I'm like stewing, or that there's like this effervescence of kind of the reflections that we've heard from you guys and from Lesego and Abu, and resonating with me. So I'm like, do I have anything to add, and do I need to say something? So I want to hold it there for now. But I think for me, what is truly coming out, and earlier this morning, it was also coming out, but I couldn't frame it. It was this story of journeys. And it was mainly also coming out because often when we think about the urban context, when we think about the city, I think I struggle with exactly that. I struggle with the fixed idea of what this thing is. And I struggle with kind of when we look at redesign and when we look at form, what I see around me is very much these permanent structures. And yet there is this space that I normally say it's invisible, even though it's very much seen, that Lesego put it so well around like fluid, that is negotiated, and kind of that's the space where I'm working. When I think about the entrepreneurs that I'm working with, when I think about the kind of systems and environments that I'm working in, like food system, and trying to kind of work with that invisible and the unseen and bring it to visibility. So it's almost like there needs to be this concrete or concrete or like this deep understanding of what journeys are we taking, and what journeys are we enabling, and even thinking around Lesego's idea around we are formed who we are and how we engage by the journeys that we are taking. I remember with my kids when they were much younger, and I live in the center, if I think about it in a built kind of context in Cape Town, between southern suburbs and what we would call the Cape Flats. And in this central area, I have a cousin who stays in the northern suburbs in Bellville. And oftentimes when we went to visit her, there's a choice of how I travel, and I take a journey to that space. There's I can book an Uber, for example, and drive highway kind of way, and not see much. Or I can go from Lansdowne, go into Nyanga, then go to Bellville, and it's a different experience. And it was so important for me, for my children to get to know that, because I wanted them to understand that there's different worlds. And in these different worlds, there's different people, but there's being is happening in these different worlds. Excitement is happening in these different worlds. I think maybe what scares me a little bit sometimes around embracing this fluidity and ambiguity is that, yes, also the activities that are violent, the activities that are extractive, the activities that have created wealth, for example, so that you could have freedom, they're quite abusive, and they're quite scary because they also started kind of from that space of fluidity and that space of ambiguity. So how do we, in the same way, catch the beauty, but in the same way, check that we don't become the very system or the very activity that we are trying to navigate and survive around. And I think this is a closing thought. Yeah, I also struggle around the term of an agency. I often self-correct myself, or when I self-reflect afterwards, especially speaking in an environment where I'm excited about young people, I'm excited about women, I'm excited about marginalized groups, and I believe that there's change because I'm seeing it happening. And I'm talking really around agency, but I know really, really, really well that as much as there's that why is the expectation that this is the very same people that should change things? And I think there's a comment that came in earlier that I want to bring in here is as we are thinking around redesign and change and shaping, I think it was, I'm gonna butcher the name right now. I think it was Tanika who was speaking around kind of like with an example of social workers and looking at administrative burdens and looking at embeddedness and new ways of doing. And yeah, and I think how much do we sometimes think of the other side of the angle? If we are wanting to enable these cities of freedom and happiness and movement and mobility, what are the burdens that we're not thinking around because those need to be enabled? And I think that's where the material conditions become important and the material resources. So how does financing connect to creating that? So it's just the thoughts that are running in my mind at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you, and valid everything you've said, and maybe just in response, particularly when you say we need to be able to balance agency on the one side, or balance what is the result that is coming out of agency, and balance it also with this other side where we're not sure and where it's prone to violence and where it's prone to get out of hand. And just asking the same question of who are we to want to balance that or to want to create that narrative? And is that not a natural consequence or a natural result of moving from the one to the other? And I'm asking this, bringing us back to the creation of the cities that we want and where this whole conversation started from, Agenda 2063, right? And I pulled up something on the agenda again, which says an integrated, a prosperous, and a peaceful Africa, specifically honing down on the word integrated. And Leseho, I'm coming back to you, where we talk about the fluidity of our cities vis-a-vis these dreams or these aspirations of an integrated, and we have anything but an integrated Africa right now. And that's even speaking at the regional level. Now, when we devolve that to national and then to the sub-regional level, we're very far from this agenda. And if this agenda, the whole purpose of RISE was inviting conversations that pushes this agenda at city level, how can we begin to activate integration at city level? And I hear you when you say we need to embrace the fluidity, we need to move away from wanting everything static. But how do we do that within the constraints of what is the current realities of our cities, where for people to feel safe and secure, there must be a sense of permanence? This is my own, this is our own, and we won't let anyone else come into it.
Rough people.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, because that's the difficulty that we face. I think, urban planners getting the city to be integrated, especially, just considering how not integrated South African cities are already from apartheid spatial planning. And it's been 23 years and we've still, or 20 something years, and we've still struggled to integrate, communities till this day. So it's a struggle, it's an ongoing struggle, but it needs intention, and it needs a functioning public realm. At least I think that's the first point of reference. It's like, if you public realm serves the people, and feels safe, like a lot of public open spaces in South Africa are underutilized, more than we project, but they're not completely safe, but they don't cater truly to how I think Africans socialize. Like it's kind of like a cut and paste of how people from different spaces socialize and occupy space. But I don't think we have truly done the project of thinking, how do Africans socialize and how does that look like in an open space? And a lot of studies are coming up, people are doing, dissertations and theses and PhDs. And I think a lot of ideas are there. They're in academia. Oftentimes, we think that in practice, we have to start from scratch. But, if we bridge this academia and practice gap, which is, of course, Rise Africa Festival is one of the platforms that does this, then you get to see that, a lot of struggles that, governments or practitioners and leaders face, people have already begun thinking about it. And that's also pertaining to, public realm and the important role that it plays in creating communities. Because, we have communities of deficits and not communities of abundance. And so if we curated a public ground that offers people more, instead of lawn, like feed people, make there plenty, that also allows for more making and conversation, just redefine what a public space is. It can be a working space, it can be a different space. We don't have to waste water and that. And I think that's when we can rebuild communication, because the communication line is also quite broken between people in cities. And rebuilding and redefining the public realm is the first point, because we see it happens, in corners where people chat or in spaces that weren't intended for that purpose. People do converse and people do integrate. And so the question becomes upscaling that, and that requires observing the existing kind of integrations that happen and then superimposing that, as opposed to getting ideas from other places. Like it's already happening. So focus on where it's happening and how it's happening, and then learn from that. I think that's the first point of reference for that.
That's a fabulous reflection. I wanted to invite one more person in who lauded one of your points earlier. Tanika, we've seen you in a number of sessions, and I wonder if you want to add a comment here, given that you've been a stalwart joining this series as well, and to reflect on what Abul and Lesejo and Takwana have said. I don't know if you're able to join us.
Hi everybody, I'm here. I was hoping to kind of just hide in the background there in the text box. There's not much to add. It's been very, very inspiring to be in a place where there's so many bright minds coming together across different sectors. I traveled, the absolute privilege of traveling from South Africa to Ethiopia by public transport last year, and then just learning about the need for people to, I guess, across borders and across cultures to really be, and across sectors to really be having these discussions. Thank you so much for all of your hard work this last week. And nothing more to add. Just thank you guys so much.
Sure. Thanks for adding in, and what a trip that must have been. Lesejo, some of your points sort of touch on day one's chat, which really sort of emphasized again this discord between planned and unplanned, and trying to bring those a bit more into alignment. I mean, what you basically said is we just need to pay attention to what people are demanding. Their footsteps are painting the pictures, and the planners need to listen to that. That's my main reflection from this. But again, I'm more interested in that. What do the material conditions of our city mean about how we participate together?
But I think another reflection and that emerges from that is the fact that we need to stop assuming, and like you rightly said, Lesejo, to actually observe. There's a lot of assumption that goes into planning, into governance, especially, and maybe there is a space for shifting from assuming to actually hearing, but not just hearing, but to also centering who we hear. Where, so to speak, people are heard, there are certain people who are welcome into the space to be heard, and other people who stay on the fringes. and are never heard. And we need to begin to shift that. Who we is, again, I guess, is my closing reflection on this evening's debrief. Whether we need to have government here in some form, in whatever tier, whether local, national, or we're speaking about regional government, but it's about thinking about who are we hearing, even when we're actually hearing. And you make reference to a lot being there in academia. And as a repentant academic, I would say, yes, there's a lot written there. But also, how does that get translated? There's this thing around critiquing academics for speaking into their hollow chambers and nobody else being able to understand what all of this is. And that also plays a role in how we translate academia in practice, and how much of academia is beginning to inform or should begin to inform practice. Because at the end of the day, academics are reaching the most unheard. But how is that influencing what we do in policy and in practice? I don't know whether you, Liseho, and Tax has any closing reflections on that.
Why don't we do a round, and then Abu as well.
And Abu also.
Oh, how? It's not easy. I don't think that it's always easy or straightforward. Oftentimes, even when the work from academia translates into practice, it's still quite like research, because I think it's okay sometimes to acknowledge that we have figured something out conceptually, but we haven't really figured out how to implement it in space. And I think that a lot of people, are giving themselves room to, try and implement things. I think if we kind of take away the fear of critique and also know that a lot of mistakes will happen when trying to transform something. And that's okay. There's a lot of learning in that process. That's also on both sides, to say somebody that is, actively attempting or experimenting with these ideas, but also on the other side, us as people who are looking at it, to grant the mercy of people who are actively experimenting and trying with very difficult things. Because, otherwise, again, it's been 20 something years and we still have the same issues that we think a lot about in academia, but still in practice, they are not easy to do, because it's not easy to prove how they financially benefit. For as long as design is at the mercy of a client, instead of like an initiative to truly better our cities, it'll always be difficult to truly reform and transform. So yeah, for me, and what we try to do at Rural Futurisms is that we get these small grants and we try to like inject them and collaborate with community members to make even the smallest of projects come to life. And from there, hope that we give ourselves and the communities a confidence to say, we can build. We have somebody said the word agency, and there's different ways that we can collectivize to make, the funds possible for even better ideas that we want. But yeah, it's not easy. And I see a lot of people doing it through the grant route, like small and experimental, because if it doesn't make profit, then government doesn't want to hear about it. Or clients, they don't want to hear about it if it doesn't actively show like an economic, which everything does in the end. People have now resorted to quantifying landscapes as monetary things, which I think is also insane that it's gotten to that point. But yeah, just trying even small will eventually lead to something.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. I think what I think you're saying at the end is, we can quantify this in economic terms, but should we really have to? Yeah. Tax, do you have a closing reflection on something you want to take forward from the festival, from this chat?
Yeah, I think from my kind of world, it's really around, because we talk about experimenting and action, and I suppose it's operationalizing and experimenting on these dialogues, and that's how we hold the space through entrepreneurship. for example, and we see our form of organizing through incubation and being an incubator. However, I think the strong desire for collective work, sometimes, especially from a developmental perspective, you can get locked in and actually extremely drained, thinking that you can experiment everything and operationalize everything. So I'm starting to, as I cross-pollinate into different environments, I'm starting to become very clear around what is the role that incubators play. What is the role that, for example, like I said before, the social and solidarity economy plays, and that we should all be doing the same, academia, public, young people, and defining that and letting kind of this adaptive capacity or facilitation or platforms be the spaces where we can negotiate around a shared goal, but go out and apply and short experiments. I feel like also, yeah, maybe our way of experimenting and researching, we need to be a little bit more, I suppose, it sounds weird because you say rapid, but then at the same time, you're looking at a long-term view. So I think what I would like to take away is that it's really how do I find myself in these spaces, the organization that I work for, the networks and the communities that I'm in, how do you create those connections and those bridges? And then for us, it's really how do you continue to test and experiment through the tool of entrepreneurship? I'll leave it there. And also being bold and taking risks. So yeah, being bold and taking risks, and sometimes not compromising. So one of the things that we are doing is starting to test what is the right financial instruments for small entrepreneurs, impact entrepreneurs, that would actually really do what we are saying we want them to do, to enable them, to bring them access to market, actually for them to even access the finances. And we meet with quite a few traditional players in this space, and all the time they're like, we will talk to you once you're able to translate whatever you're doing in like that, the economic outputs, because that's what our interest in. And for us, it's like, we're not going to be driven by that call because it might change and shape the way that we are engaging and experimenting with this exercise. So it's being bold and taking the risk. And it's not going to be nice sometimes because you need resources. But again, I think that what has come out a lot for me when in this space today and yesterday also is the psychological framing and taking care of ourselves. In that sense is also important in this space.
Thanks, Jax. I think that's a really nice closing reflection. Abul, you've listened to our reflections. What will you take forward from this?
Sorry, I hope like everyone is able to hear me. I'm having some connectivity issues. But yeah, I think there's been so many very valid points that have also just like allowed me to think through my own practice, you know, especially in terms of being really bold with my experimentation and also allowing my agency and the agency of the participants that I tend to work with to come across a lot more. And in terms of my engagement with you know, people that I've worked with, you know, through film and, you know, different films, not just like thinking safety, but in some of the more current work that I'm doing is that there's a lot of solutions that are already being built up in small pockets of people who are working together or trying to transform something that they experience. So I think there's already so many solutions that are existing that we don't necessarily have access to, we're not aware of. And once we become aware of them, it's important to, you know, like Tokona was talking about funding or being able to facilitate or bringing those voices to the forefront and enabling people to be their own heroes sometimes, but also with the right support, not just like, you know, people being heroes without any sort of systematic support, but also ensuring that this support is is negotiated like in a very, I don't know how to say it, in a very fair way. Yeah, but yeah, I don't have too much to say on this, but yeah, I think that's some of the points that I wanted to make, and yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the reflections. And thanks everyone for joining us here. I think my take home, I'm going to reference a point made by one of our team who referenced biomimicry. She brought out something quite poetic, saying that life creates conditions conducive to life. And she thinks that cities must create conditions conducive to thrive. And I think that resonated very much around cities as enablers. And I think Lesego made a point about cities enabling flow and movement, which I think we all resonate with. We don't want to be stuck. So I think that's something I'm going to ruminate on going forward. I'd like to just offer the formal thank you on behalf of ICLEI Africa, Our Future Cities, African Center for Cities, Red Cross Crescent Climate Center, and Surge Africa, who are all inveigled in this really exciting platform. And I must say, it is really addictive being on a platform that connects with so many accents from across the continent. So thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to hand to Fumi to close us off.
Thank you all, and thank you, Paul. I think Paul has nicely summed that up. And going forward from here, I hope that you center once again the cities that you deserve, and that we all work collectively towards achieving those cities. Until next year, see you all, and please, let's be in touch. Thank you so much. From the Rise Africa team. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.